The Chinese military, the People's Liberation Army, just released a new video bragging about their mad skills as an army, showing off their weapons, showing off their long-range sniper skills. A lot of what's in this new video from the Chinese army is clearly designed to show off their capability in terms of war with another nation state, a military-to-military kind of fight. So, you need dogfighting fighter jets and missiles and tanks and stuff. But there's also this stuff that you see on your screen right now. In this video they just released, they appear to be going out of their way to show how the Chinese army could be deployed to devastating effect against civilians, against rioters, protesters. Some of that involves using water cannons. A lot of it is, street maneuvers by uniformed soldiers using their shields, using their guns. Here in one clip from the video, you can see soldiers in formation. What they're actually shouting here is, "Fall back, fall back, fall back." Why would soldiers in the Chinese army need to shout fall back in English as they confront people in the streets? And the only place in China, of course, you would ever have to do anything in English is Hong Kong, where lots of people speak English. Why are they rolling out this video now? As the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong have become more persistent and more intense, China has jumped right to the end of the plot, right to the end of the movie, and they have now started overtly threatening to use their gigantic military against the civilian pro-democracy protesters. You might have seen online over the last 2 days the intimidating footage of these huge columns of identical hulking Chinese military vehicles flooding from the Chinese mainland toward the Hong Kong border. And this isn't like surreptitious footage that somebody sneaked out. China is showing off that they are massing this kind of force. State-run media outlets are promoting these kinds of images, along with the Chinese army promoting this propaganda video about what it would look like for Chinese soldiers to deploy full force against people in Chinese streets. Protesters basically shut down the main airport in Hong Kong yesterday and again today, and it looks like they will be back tomorrow. The violence by the police versus the pro-democracy protesters over these past few weeks and over these past couple of days in particular has just been out loud and terrifying. We've seen blood-curdling footage from police attacking protesters in subway stations and train stations, now at the Hong Kong airport. Here at home, President Trump today was asked about the situation in Hong Kong, and he responded with one of his patented both sides-isms, saying, quote, "I hope it works out for everybody, including China, by the way." I'm sure China is heartened to know that the American president is hoping this is all going to work out for them, as they now threaten overtly to use the People's Liberation Army in the streets against Chinese unarmed civilians in Hong Kong. And so here's this new thing that we've never really had to contend with before. While President Trump made those remarks today, while he spoke at the White House about China and the protests in Hong Kong and what China might do to those protesters, the president's eldest son at that moment was in Indonesia, launching a new Trump-branded real estate project. Of course, for the company the president still owns and still profits from. His eldest son was in Indonesia today touting their latest, quote, integrated lifestyle resort and theme park. Theme park, Trumpland. It's not Trumpland. It's not like dystopian Disneyland. But there is apparently some sort of amusement park that's attached to this real estate development, to this new bunch of Trump-branded condos and hotel rooms. And here's the thing. When we first learned the details of this new Indonesia project the president's company is building, when we first learned those details last spring, we learned, as part of that, the exciting news that the theme park part of this development, the part that presumably adds most of the value to the prospect of living in these Trump condos or renting these hotel rooms, the adjacent theme park for this development was to be built by the Metallurgical Corporation of China, a state-owned Chinese construction company. So the Chinese government builds the theme park as part of their One Belt, One Road initiative, and then they attach the theme park to Trump's new for-profit hotel and condo development. And the advancement of that project was being celebrated today, literally at the same moment, while the president was saying he hopes this unfolding, maybe bloodbath in Hong Kong works out okay for China. The involvement of this Chinese-run company in the Trump development over there was first reported by Agence France-Presse and the New York Times and the AP last year. Literally today at this press conference involving the president's son, the Indonesian partner in the deal suddenly announced at the press conference with no warning that no, they've decided not to use the Chinese company to build the thing after all. But it's actually not clear from the way he said it if that just means they're not having the Chinese construction company build it, or maybe it just means a Chinese bank isn't financing the whole development anymore. Nobody's actually been able to confirm whether Chinese state-run firms or banks are out of the Trump deal. The Indonesian guy just blurted out today that that's happening, that's a big change, and we don't know. So yeah, maybe not, unclear. Nobody in the Trump White House seems much to mind either way. But that's a new place that we're in as a country, not just for the president and for his family and for his ongoing business interests, but for us as a country, right? We are here in a new place at a fraught time. The biggest rising power in the world, the most populous nation on earth, right now, as we speak, is facing the biggest internal political confrontation their government has had since Tiananmen Square, which resulted in a massacre in the streets a generation ago, right? These pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong are a very big deal. Simultaneously, the physically largest country on earth, our Cold War nemesis, the country that interfered in our last election to try to install Donald Trump in the White House, they are now also facing their biggest internal protests against their government since the protests back in 2011, 2012 that seemed to have driven Vladimir Putin absolutely around the bend. Again, those are pro-democracy protests against the Putin government, pro-democracy protests in the streets of Moscow, pro-democracy protests in the streets of Hong Kong. In Russia, these major protests rattling the government have been ramping up over the last few weeks. They're now coinciding with a brand new Russia crisis in which citizens of that country are being rattled like rocks in a tin can by what is apparently a new and terrifying nuclear accident of unknown scope. It's being called the worst known nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. And Russia's citizens have every reason to believe that their government is lying to them and covering up what actually happened, with lives at stake and lives already lost. So here's my question, right? In a normal time, in normal circumstances, what would our country do here that would be best for us and best for the world? What could we do? I mean, I set this apart from normal circumstances in our government. I mean, this administration, this president personally, don't have to get me started in terms of him in Russia, right? But I mean, even just looking at him in China alone, he and his family literally today celebrating a business deal that will mean the president will personally benefit potentially to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, we think maybe from Chinese government investment, while he, at that moment, is commenting at the White House on China's threat to use military force against his own civilian population. What does the U.S. president have to say about that while they're stuffing his pockets at the same time? I mean, when we've got that kind of problem at the top of our government, what is the material consequence for us as Americans and for our country in moments like this? What does that do not just to our standing in the world, our sense of who we are, but our ability for our country to do what's right? The ability for our country to maneuver at fraught times like this, even to do just what's best for us, to stand up for what we want to be standing up for, to act in a way that we think is most beneficial to our own interests. I mean, what should we be able to do at times like this under normal circumstances? And can we salvage any of that with a multiply critically compromised president at the head of the federal government? I know just the person to ask. That's next.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.